What's up, everybody? So I don't talk about Making a Murderer as much on the channel anymore, and it's not because I'm not interested in it. I'm still super interested in it. There's just not as much information coming out. There's no new information coming out, really. There's been nothing for almost a year now, but I still like to go over every new article that comes out in the case. Whether, in my opinion, whether Steven Avery is guilty or not, there are so many really bizarre and really strange things in the case that, you know, all of them can't be a coincidence. All of them can't be just like, and maybe they are, I don't know. All of them can't be just like random things that happen. There's just so many weird things in the case, in my opinion. And that's why everyone is still so interested in it after all this time. One of the biggest questions I get is if there's going to be a Making a Murderer Season 3, and as of now anyway, there's no information out there. There's no inkling of anything that would suggest they are ever going to do a Making a Murderer Season 3 at this point. There would have to be something new in the case that happens, like Steven Avery gets an evidentiary hearing, something happens with Brendan Dassey. Like, there would have to be something interesting that they could film, and right now, that's just not happening. And according to people really close with the situation, they have also stated that there is nothing going on for Season 3 at this point in time. But a new article was posted. It's not new anymore. I somehow missed it. It came out a few months ago, and I just saw it pop up today, and I want to go over it. It is from the Milwaukee Journal, and I'll link it in the description below if you want to go have a view for yourself. Steven Avery's paths to appeal narrow after multiple attempts, legal experts said. A decade since the Netflix series Making a Murderer made Steven Avery a household name in the world of true crime, the now 63-year-old Steven Avery and his attorney continue to try to prove his innocence. Avery was convicted in 2007 of murdering 25-year-old Teresa Halbach on Halloween in 2005. At the time of Halbach's death, Steven Avery had been free from prison for just over 2 years after serving 18 years for a 1985 sexual assault he didn't commit. Released in December 2015, Making a Murderer, the 10-part docuseries, was the work of two Columbia University students who closely followed and documented the 2006-2007 court proceedings for Steven Avery and his teenage nephew involved in the case, Brendan Dassey. The saddest thing about this case, in my opinion, is Brendan Dassey. I do not believe that Brendan had anything to do with what happened, and I'm not completely, like, that's just my opinion. That's just what I believe. Could I be wrong? Absolutely. And if he did have something to do with it, it's only because, and this is like one version of the story, it's simply because he was made to do it by his uncle. If Steven Avery is guilty, and Brendan Dassey had something to do with it, Brendan Dassey only had something to do with it because of his uncle. I don't believe that he did personally, because there's no evidence that he was ever there. There's no DNA. There's nothing that links Brendan Dassey to this crime. There's literally nothing. I know there's people out there that just casually watch the case or whatever, but there is legitimately nothing that links Brendan Dassey to the murder of Teresa Halbach. With the show's release, details about Teresa Halbach's murder went from small-town lore to internationally discussed true crime story. Making a Murderer puts Steven Avery and Brendan Dassey's cases and their appeal efforts on a global stage. While Dassey has largely exhausted his judicial paths to appeal, Avery continues to fight to get his case back in front of a judge. The most recent decision on Avery's appeal efforts came in May. That would be May of 2025, so almost a year ago, when the Wisconsin Supreme Court declined to review the state Court of Appeals denial of Avery's third motion for post-conviction relief. Attorney Kathleen Zellner, who's Steven Avery's attorney, at the time said the next step would be to file a petition in federal court, which probably takes a very long time to get heard or read or seen or however it works. Kathleen Zellner said Steven Avery plans to file a habeas corpus petition in federal court, the first time his case has risen to the federal level, but she didn't provide a time frame for when it will be filed. We are evaluating all of our options, including new DNA testing, utilizing the substantial improvements made in DNA testing equipment since 2005. They recently linked a new victim to, was it Ted Bundy? Like last week, because of the improvements in DNA testing. Steven Avery has multiple options and no time bar to presenting new exculpatory evidence, but appealing a conviction is difficult, especially after repeated denials, legal expert Adam Stevenson said. Making a Murderer told a story of unlikely circumstances. Making a Murderer highlighted the unusual set of circumstances surrounding Steven Avery's murder conviction. In 1985, at age 23, Steven Avery was wrongfully... Imagine being in prison for that long. Twice. Was wrongfully convicted of first-degree sexual assault and attempted first-degree murder at trial. The victim, was a 36-year-old woman who was assaulted while jogging, identified Steven Avery from a police lineup that didn't include the actual perpetrator, who ended up being Gregory Allen. Avery was sentenced to 32 years in prison in 2003 after serving 18 years of his sentence, which he could have been out, what was it, like 1995 when this information actually came to light, but the officer at the time, like, just didn't pass it along. That's one of those things where it's like, that's insane. Like, you took another 8 years from somebody just because, like, you didn't pass along this information. You said you already got the right guy. Like, insanity. In 2003, after serving 18 years of his sentence, Steven Avery was exonerated when DNA evidence determined the assailant's real identity, Gregory Allen, who by that time was in prison serving a 60-year sentence for a separate sexual assault in Green Bay that happened around a decade after the 1985 case. That guy could have been in prison since 1985, which would have saved this next person that he's in prison serving a 60-year sentence for from being sexually assaulted if police did stuff correctly in 1985. Like, insanity, man. On October 31st, 2005, Teresa Halbach, a freelance photographer from St. John in neighboring Calumet County, went to Steven Avery's family's 40-acre auto salvage yard outside Two Rivers on assignment for an auto trade magazine. She was never seen again. Steven Avery was arrested and charged with Teresa Halbach's murder after a large amount of evidence was found on the family property. Teresa Halbach's vehicle was in the salvage yard, partially covered with branches with a disconnected battery. Remnants of her camera and cell phone were in a burn barrel on the property, and human bone fragments, which experts said were from Halbach, were located in and around a burn pit, among other evidence. Avery and Teresa Halbach's blood was found in the vehicle, and its key was found in Steven Avery's bedroom. At the time of his arrest, Steven Avery had been a topic in the news and in legal circles. He had a pending lawsuit against Manitowoc County and former county officials for his wrongful conviction, in which he was requesting a payout of $36 million. He eventually settled for $400,000 because he needed money to pay his legal bills for the murder charge. A task force in Steven Avery's name led to the introduction of legislation aimed to avoid wrongful convictions through reform and things like eyewitness evidence and DNA preservation. Just about a month before Avery's arrest, Steven Avery has had repeated appeal denials at the state level. Since 2009, Steven Avery has filed multiple motions for post-conviction relief. It's expected for a defendant's appeal process to take multiple years, and Stevenson, who is a clinical professor and a former director of the University of Wisconsin Law School. However, each motion denial narrows what more can be done. He said, as you move, whether it's in time or whether it's in number and types of filings beyond sentencing, the pathway is more and more difficult. more and more limited for an individual to basically do anything to their case, overturning a conviction, adjusting a sentence, things like that. Stevenson said a motion for post-conviction relief is a request to a judge to take another look at a conviction or sentence due to alleged errors that weren't addressed at trial court proceedings, and is typically the first step for Wisconsin defendants seeking to appeal a conviction. Stephen Avery's first post-conviction motion, filed in 2009, was denied in Manitowoc County Circuit Court in 2010. In that motion, he argued that law enforcement violated his constitutional rights, and the trial judge wrongfully accused a juror at trial and replaced them with an alternate. Avery then attempted to appeal that denial through the Wisconsin Court of Appeals, but that court upheld the circuit court's decision in 2011. The Wisconsin Supreme Court then declined to review the case. Avery tried again in 2013 when he filed a motion pro se, P-R-O-S-E, which means without attorney representation. The motion was denied. He actually, at one point in time, asked Ken Kratz to have a look at the case. That motion was denied at the circuit court level in 2015, and Avery tried to appeal that decision to the appellate court in December 2015. However, the release of Making a Murderer the same month caught the attention of Kathleen Zellner, a Chicago attorney specializing in wrongful convictions, and she took the case. With Zellner's involvement, Avery's voluntarily dismissed his pro se appeal. With the new legal team, Avery filed a second motion for post-conviction relief in 2017, more than 1,200 pages. I've read all of these. It's crazy. More than 1,200 pages. It made various allegations, including that law enforcement planted evidence against Avery and false testimony was given at trial. The motion was denied, and appeals to that decision took the appeal through 2021 when the state Supreme Court declined to review the case. Steven Avery filed his third motion for post-conviction relief in 2022, alleging that another man killed Teresa Halbach, framed Avery by leaving the key to Halbach's vehicle in Steven Avery's bedroom, and then was a key witness against him at trial. The motion claimed new evidence supported these allegations. It was then denied at every level, ending with the Wisconsin Supreme Court in May. So he's talking, allegedly, about Bobby Dassey, of course. They just don't print his name in any of these. Stevenson said there are caveats to a defendant's ability to seek post-conviction relief through a federal court. If it can only look at alleged violations of the U.S. Constitution and federal statutes, he said. However, this narrow power over state criminal cases was further narrowed by 1996 legislation known as AEDPA. One thing AEDPA did was set a strict 1-year time limit on the filing of a federal habeas corpus petition. You can get sentenced I'm not just speaking Steven Avery here. You can get sentenced, wrongfully convicted in prison, but you only have a year, and that's fine, but you only have a year to be like, hey, I didn't do it. Insanity. Bananas and bonkers. The 1-year clock starts after the judgment of conviction is finalized. Shortly after, what case was it? There was a girl recently that, I think it was the girl that was found guilty of killing her boyfriend and injuring herself when she drove her car into a building or a brick wall or something, and her lawyer missed the appeal by a day, and now she can't appeal it anymore. That happened like a week or two ago. Crazy. The 1-year clock starts after the judgment of the conviction is finalized, shortly after a case's conclusion. However, it can also start after newly discovered facts or evidence related to a U.S. constitutional claim, Stevenson said. However, this fact or evidence must be both not previously known and could not have been known through reasonable investigation. Kathleen Zellner has allegedly uncovered a lot of that since then. For example, Stevenson said a person can't sit in prison for 5 years, not attempting to investigate, and then start at the 5th year and go, oh my goodness, I found something. If they could have found it earlier, that isn't newly discovered. This 1 year clock is very important and often a very difficult thing to overcome for folks, especially later on in cases. Denial of a defendant's federal petition leaves future hope for post-conviction relief very unlikely. Stevenson said that if Avery files a federal habeas corpus petition and that gets denied, he could potentially file another in the future, but it gets less and less likely to be successful. That's because AEDPA raised the bar for a second or successive habeas corpus petitions, requiring that the facts of the new claim are enough to establish that, but for the constitutional error, no reasonable fact finder, meaning the jury in Avery's case, would have found the defendant guilty. Essentially, the new piece of evidence wouldn't have simply maybe given rise to a different argument at trial, but it itself would be essentially the piece that would change what the fact finder would do from convict to acquit, Stevenson said. A successful second or successive habeas corpus petition is really possible only if a defendant finds the proverbial silver bullet. Brendan Dassey almost won on appeal, but it was overturned. They had like a release date for this kid, something along those lines, and it was like, we're going to release him Thursday, and then they were like, nope. Man, that must have been so hard. This is the territory Dassey is in after his federal habeas petition was denied, but only after he came very close to succeeding. Brendan Dassey was arrested in 2006 after then 16-year-old told law enforcement that he sexually assaulted Halbach at Avery's command and assisted his uncle in killing Teresa Halbach and burning her body. His police interview drew criticism by his attorneys and legal experts for interrogation tactics that they said took advantage of his age and IQ that bordered on intellectual disability. In 2016, U.S. Magistrate Judge William Duffin overturned Dassey's conviction after reviewing his federal habeas corpus petition. The ruling granted Dassey's petition for either release or a new trial. In his 91-page decision, Duffin said Dassey's constitutional rights were violated, and the judge criticized investigators, state courts, and Dassey's pretrial attorney for how they handled the case. Prosecutors appealed Duffin's ruling, but a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Courts of Appeals for the 7th Circuit, which oversees lower courts in Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana, affirmed the decision 2-1 in June 2017. However, prosecutors then sought further review by the full 7th Circuit Court, which upheld Dassey's conviction 4-3. The majority opinion said they didn't find Dassey's confession to police was coerced. The dissenting opinion called the decision a travesty of justice. I agree. The only higher court to hear appeals of federal court rulings is the U.S. Supreme Court. In June 2018, the Supreme Court would announce it would not hear Brendan Dassey's case. Bananas. Aside from the motions and petitions, defendants seeking post-conviction relief can request clemency from the U.S. President or state governor. Stevenson said clemency primarily comes in 2 forms: a pardon which erases a conviction and restores a person's legal rights, or which shortens a person's sentence. In 2019, Dassey petitioned Governor Tony Evers to grant him clemency, but Evers denied it. In 2022, Avery's trial attorneys Dean Strang and Jerome Buting wrote letters to Evers requesting clemency for Dassey. While Avery is serving a life sentence with no possibility of release from prison on extended supervision, Dassey may be eligible for release in 2048, which is still 22 years away, when he's 59 years old. So that's everything new that's going on in the case. It's a crazy case. If you haven't watched Making a Murderer, watch Making a Murderer season 1 and 2. There's also a rebuttal series called Convicting a Murderer. I don't know if that's still on Daily Wire or not, but that's where it was. The guy that made it, whose name escapes me, that I did talk to a few times, said it was on Amazon Prime at one point in time, but it never came on Amazon Prime in Canada. Anyway, I don't know if it's on Amazon Prime anywhere else. Sean Reck, I think that was his name. But what do you think of this case? It's truly bizarre. Let me know. Leave some comments below. I hope you're having a good day, and I will see you again soon.